Phantom Blade Zero Extreme Mode? What is Extreme Mode?
In this Phantom Blade Zero video, we're going to be taking a look at the extreme difficulty of the game that was added during Tokyo Game Show's demo, which I recently played a couple days ago in Japan. And this is absolutely absurdly hard. I had mentioned in our previous video that Phantom Blade Zero was a little bit on the easy side.
Yeah.
Well, when playing the extreme difficulty, that is no longer the case. So we're going to get into that in just a second. You may notice that this gameplay footage looks familiar. These are the same 3 bosses and area of the game that you saw in the Gamescom demo. But this time we're going to be showcasing most of it on the extreme difficulty with some comparisons to the hard difficulty, which I also recorded, and also showcasing 2 new weapons. One of them is a curved sword that kind of attacks quickly like you might expect it to.
This is really
kind
cool.
of allows you like quick slashes, and even seems to have a bleed effect that triggers if you hit the enemy or boss enough times, as you'll see like a huge chunk of their health rip off with this like bloody explosion if you hit them enough times quickly. So that's been added. And then there's also like a dual circular blades kind of paired weapon that attacks very, very quickly. And when you finish off your combo, sometimes you can even throw those blades over a distance. So if you dodge backward, you can like still put in damage into the boss from a good distance.
It's like chakrams. Yeah, really that's cool.
They also
like
showcase a
Final
new
Fantasy
ranged
14.
weapon, or at least one that I didn't notice was in the previous demo, which is like the dancing lion, which allows you to kind of put on the dancing lion helmet and
that's
just
cool.
like emit fire in all different directions. You can kind of point the direction that you want the fire to blow, and it's probably pretty good with multiple enemies, I would imagine. Although I didn't manage
do any damage
to use it super effectively in my time playing. I just didn't give it a lot of thought, really. Okay, so moving on to the extreme difficulty.
Yeah, let me see.
This is a setting that the creative director told me will not be unlocked by default and will be unlocked after playing through the game once.
Okay.
So this effectively could be considered your New Game Plus difficulty if you move on to it. I don't know if there's a New Game Plus, but this difficulty won't be unlocked until you play through the game one time, so you're not going to be able to start off with Extreme.
See, like, so I just really hope, like, here's the problem, is that I think Extreme modes and hard modes should be, well, actually, what I think is there shouldn't be any Extreme modes or hard modes at all, and I think there should only be one level of difficulty, and everybody should have the same experience. That's my preferred experience. That's what I think. And I think that players that are good at a game will figure out ways to make the game more challenging on their own without the developer needing to do it themselves, like Dark Souls or Elden Ring, right? My opinion. I think difficulty modes are trash. That being said, if you're going to have a difficulty mode, make it to where the bosses don't just have more health and do more damage. Give them new abilities. Give them, like, you know, more mobs. Like, I hate to say this because the game is such a piece of fucking shit. But Dark Souls 2 did a great job with New Game Plus. They added in new mobs, more monsters, more challenges, and it was a lot better. New movesets, yeah, exactly. New weapons, yeah.
There are some things I noticed about Extreme, and then there are other things the creative director mentioned to me while I was playing. And first of all, it seems like the parry timing for the blue flashes and the dodge timing for the red flashes is much tighter. Felt like it was more difficult to pull these off and get the slowed time effect. And a lot of times I was just outright trying to just get a deflect off at all or get a dodge off at all instead of trying to time it perfectly.
I will be honest, I kind of don't like that. I don't like that because it feels gamey. That's my opinion. I think that you should have a different vector of difficulty rather than having mechanics function differently.
A lot of times I would just die to these bosses anyway. Secondly, the health pools and damage that these bosses do doesn't seem to have been increased. And when I was talking with the creative director of the game, he mentioned that the difference between hard and extreme isn't the stats of the boss. It's not these things. It's the actual AI has been tweaked. And when you actually look at the gameplay of...
In extreme mode, they just input read you. You want to heal? Boom, bitch. Nope. It's the same as like how Ishin, you know, Ishin does that fucking impale move. If you gourd in Sekiro, or like the the Crucible Knight goes for the sword impale. If you go and try to heal, yeah.
The boss in hard mode versus the gameplay of the boss in Extreme, you can kind of notice a few things. The first thing that you're going to notice is that on Extreme, bosses don't just let you attack into the back of them like repeatedly, like, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a row without doing anything. So you could really rip off huge chunks of health in hard mode, but on Extreme, you tend to turn around pretty quickly out of this and get back to attacking you. So you kind of got to be on the ready to go on to the defense very, very quickly at a moment's notice.
So this means when I play this game, I need to get a bigger weapon that'll stagger them more if I play on extreme difficulty. That makes sense, sure.
Notice what you can in this game, so that's not a problem. So you can be comboing away and go immediately to defending, but you got to be ready for it. If you expect to fight the same way when you've got bosses back to you,
I need a bigger stick.
You're going to be in a bad spot. Secondly, it feels like the window to attack these bosses is a lot less, meaning that they attack you more often, putting you on the defensive a lot more often, making you have to parry and dodge their attacks more in order to win fights, rather than you being to play a bit more aggressively. You can still play aggressively if you're good, but I feel like the vast majority of players, when they're playing on the extreme difficulty the first time, are going to be put a little bit more on the back foot, and they're going to have to get their parry timing down. They're going to have to get their dodge timing down a bit more, because these things will become more important in extreme difficulty. And then
I think all that makes sense. Like, yeah, of course, that's the way it should be. I think that bosses that don't give you time to heal at all, like, that can be kind of unfun to deal with. That's like my personal opinion. It's like, fuck, right? Like, I can't get a heal. It's like kind of stressful to play, but it's always like a middle ground, right?
One of the things you'll notice, particularly on the last boss of
this is as somebody who I cannot express how good of a game I think Blasphemous 1 and 2 is. Seeing this boss makes me so happy.
Demo is that he tends to do feints where like he'll spin.
Yeah, look at it.
Looks like he's going to do an attack, but then he spins again, and then he looks like he's going to do an attack, or maybe he doesn't attack, or he changes up his attack. And that's because the way the AI is designed in extreme mode is that the AI is actively determining what you're doing, what it's doing, what its positioning is, what you've been doing, and it's assessing, you know, based on your health, based on your distance, based on...
It's such a fine needle to thread between doing something with, like, the AI for a boss that makes it to where it feels gamey and input ready, versus making it feel like it's actually rewarding and more difficult and challenging. I feel like it's so hard to be able to get that right.
All of these different factors, what its next move should be, and it learns very, very quickly. So when you back away, for instance, to heal, it can determine that you're going to do that. It knows your health is low. It knows you're going to try and back away and heal. So if you try and create separation, it's just going to fling its weapon at you and hit you and interrupt you. And then if you try and heal again real quick, it's just going to do it again. It knows what you're trying to do. And so you really have to like get behind a pillar to heal, or you kind of have to like adapt your strategy, because the AI is really, really good. So generally what this means...
I also think that like I approach a type of style like this with a tremendous amount of skepticism, because oftentimes, like, you guys know that, like, for Ishin, for example, if you heal far enough away from him, you can mirror key counter him, and you can force him into that move that ends the fight faster, right? So you can turn input reading into a like a crutch.
Creative director said to me while I was fighting,
you can bait them. Exactly.
The boss fights kind of end up on extreme difficulty being more like a fighting game, where if you're playing on like the very hard difficulty of a fighting game like Street Fighter or something like that, the AI can kind of anticipate what you're going to do, and you have to get better in order to beat it. And that's really what I had to do in order to successfully pull off these boss fights. And what I kind of realized was that I was relying too much...
I'll tell you this. If I look at the way these monsters fight, the animations feel very good. Like, to me, like, I'm all about, like, moment-to-moment, second-to-second gameplay. This looks incredibly well-designed.
On parrying, I wasn't dodging enough. I was using my dodge too much defensively, and then I started using my dodge, or kind of shadow step, to move offensively. So I would start dodging through the attacks and attacking the boss. And the boss didn't seem to be able to know what to do with that as much, because it's reading a dodge, and I think it thinks that when you're dodging out of an attack rather than towards an attack.
Yeah.
And that worked out really well for me, and after I kind of put that together, I was able to successfully take down that boss. But it was very, very challenging. The last boss, I don't know how many times I died on in extreme mode. It was like, I want to say 15 times on that boss. I died a lot. And if you look at my playtime and deaths for the hard mode versus the extreme mode, you'll notice
I mean, you think about that, that's really kind of a lot, because if you look at the way that, like, I mean, because this guy played it before. So it's like, if you already know the mechanics and you're still getting killed that many times, that ain't a lot. Yeah, it is. I think dying 15 times to a boss that you've already fought before is that's a pretty good amount. Especially also, like, I mean, this guy, yeah, he's played, like, how many times do you think he's played Elden Ring, right? And Dark Souls. That's a lot. I think that a lot of times people try to, like, a big mistake that I think a lot of devs make, especially the ones that are making Souls-like games, is that they try to design the game for people that have played every single one of these games. I think if you do that, you create a target audience that's very narrow. So you should, like, Wukong, I think, is so successful and so good because the combat does have a lot of depth. And if, like, you know, I'm playing through, like, New Game Plus 2 right now with, like, the red, like, the Yasuka armor, like, where it makes you take more damage. And yeah, it's a lot harder to play, right? But it's more rewarding in a way, too. And so it's like, you shouldn't make that the default. Isn't this only in the hardest difficulty? Yeah.
It took me over double the time to finish, and I had, like, over triple the deaths. So it is definitely much, much harder. And talking to the creative director and his team, they were telling me that the average person playing this demo would get through in about an hour with about 50 plus deaths.
Wow.
I managed to do quite a bit better than that. I have obviously played this a little bit before,
yeah, you
so
already
that
played
kind
the
of gave
game.
me an advantage. But that is a lot of deaths and a lot of game time for 3 bosses in a very small area of the game to explore to give you some idea of how difficult this is going to be. Anyway, I really loved the new difficulty mode. It was seriously rewarding when I would beat bosses, but it could also be frustrating. It's a bit of a double-edged sword because I actually started playing through again on the extreme mode a second time to see how I did, because I was talking to some of the members of S Game, and they were saying that because of the way the AI is designed, like, each time you fight a boss, it's not always going to be the same because it's reacting in real time to what you're doing. So if your strategy changes, the boss's strategy changes, and the attacks that it might do might be different. So I started playing through on a second playthrough, and when I got to the second boss, I really struggled with the second boss on the second time through, which I didn't.
I think that's something that's really interesting and really good, because it's one of the things that I think Elden Ring does extremely well, is that there's some bosses, and it's not really about, like, AI input reading. It's about the way that the boss is designed and the different challenges that different builds have, and how, like, basically different they are between bosses. Like, for example, if you're playing a melee bonk build, Renala is really easy. But if you're playing a caster build, you're going to have a bad time. Or, like, vice versa when you're fighting, like, Margit, right? Like, a caster build is way easier. So I think that's really, really good because it adds replayability to the game.
In my first playthrough of Extreme, because the strategy that I was trying to employ that I had learned on the final boss was not working on that boss, and I had to, like, kind of go back.
I'm gonna say, like, this is really smooth. Watch this.
On the final boss was not working on that.
That's extremely fucking clean. I'm really impressed by this
boss, and I had to, like, kind of go back to the strategy I was using before, and I was trying to remember what exactly that was.
Combat looks great.
It was
it does.
really tough. I ended up dying a lot more times the second time. So I definitely think it's going to be kind of a mixed bag for people, where it could be very, very frustrating, but it can also be really, really fun and rewarding depending on what kind of player you are. Again,
I also think that, like, one thing, this is a minor thing, I think that being able to jump over attacks, I don't know if this game has a base jump, but you should be able to jump over attacks, because I feel like it feels really good to be able to do that. Yeah, like, I wish they had that because it's cool. Like Super Mario, yeah.
Thankfully, you don't have to play this
like
difficulty
Wukong
mode.
and Elden Ring has that
after beating the game. So most
Sekiro has, like, you know,
the
like the down sweep and shit. Yeah,
through on normal or hard, and I don't know how many people will play again after that on extreme. Obviously, the hardcore.
If you want people to play the hard mode, what you have to do is you have to add in, like, different types of, like, mechanics and armor and things like that you can get from playing hard mode. Like, Wukong has, like, a lot of extra things that you can only get in New Game Plus. So it gives you a new reason to continue playing the game. Like, beating the game one time should not be the end of the game. Yeah, like Neo Wulong. I don't know about those two. I played Wulong, but I never did New Game Plus. But yeah, it's really important. I'll be right back. But yes, I think that really for, like, for games that want to have a new game plus, you have to allow the player to like unlock new things or unlock cooler things by doing like the harder mode. I think Final Fantasy 16 tried to do this, but it didn't really commit to it enough.
Will, but I don't think that's the majority of people playing this game. So that kind of wraps up my video on Phantom Blade's extreme difficulty. I'm really, really enjoying this game. The more I see from it, the better it's getting. I cannot wait.
I want to play this.
I'll leave you here with a couple of side-by-side videos of the boss fights
Yeah.
on the hard difficulty versus the extreme difficulty, so you can see kind of the differences in the boss fights with no commentary, and you can just watch those. But otherwise, I want to know what you guys make of the game so far. What do you make of the extreme difficulty? What do you make of the gameplay that you're seeing? I feel like the combat in extreme difficulty is just so much fun to watch. It's probably a little bit less flashy than on hard because you're playing a lot more defensively, but I still think it looks wicked when you watch it and you're watching back your gameplay going like, wow, was I really able to do those things? But I want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below.
I think that good players will still be able to play aggressively in that mode. Like, I'm sure that, like, 2 days after this game comes out, there's going to be the Ong Ball, like, extreme difficulty, no-hit kill of these bosses. Like, for sure. I think they move a little bit faster in the extreme mode, too. That's the way it feels. The Sekiro knockoff seems fantastic. Yeah, no, this is good, man. I think also being able to stun lock bosses is probably a big difference between the extreme and like the hard mode too, it seems. Because they're just so aggressive. Looks nothing like Sekiro. Well, there's a guy, and he has a sword, and it looks like it's like a Asian theme, so it's Sekiro. There it is, right? I mean, everybody knows that. It's red, just like the Mortal Blade. What do you expect? Yeah, it's Sekiro too. Yeah, just look at it. You mean Neo? No, Sekiro's more popular. It's Sekiro. Yeah. The enemies have a posture bar, bro. How is it not Sekiro? Yeah, Lost Ark is pretty much just Sekiro. That's true. It's actually crazy how aggressive these things are. I'm gonna be kind of curious to see how this will play. And I wonder also, like, if I end up playing the extreme mode, I wonder if it's going to actually be hard or not. But I think it's such an interesting idea. Like, there's just more combat here. It's such an interesting idea to make it to where the combat... I'll link you guys the video if you want to watch the rest of it or, like, look at the actual combat, etc. This is a... yeah, FX Drive still exists? Yeah, this is a great video. Like, he made another video about this game, too, and I thought both of them were really good. So yeah, I hope he keeps doing it. Like, this is great. Yeah, it's a good impression so far. Yeah, I think so too. I really think this game is looking really appealing to me. Like, I've said this before, like, any time that there's an action combat game with swords, or really any action combat game, like, I'll probably play it. I feel like I've done that. Have I missed any of them? I guess I didn't play Rise of the Ronin. But that's because another game came out at the exact same time. I forgot which one it was. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Neo, Tsushima. I did not play Ghost of Tsushima. That's the one I didn't play. Yeah, Neo, Dragon's Dogma 2. Oh, I didn't play Dragon's Dogma 2? I didn't know that. Yeah, I had no idea. So I didn't play the game. That's crazy. Wow. Yeah, thanks for letting me know. Stellar Blade? I played Stellar Blade. What do you mean? Yeah, Rise of the Ronin, that's the one that I didn't do. Thymesia, did you play that? No, it didn't really look that good. It just looked like a moderately polished Souls ripoff. And so I decided not to play it. I saw Chance played it, and he had a, I think, relatively good opinion of it. But I think that the game there's a lot of the guys that tried to make, like, for example, like Lords of the Fallen, Bleak Faith, Thymesia. All of these games, I think, had something to them, but none of them really had a identity beyond like just being kind of like a Souls-like game. And I think that these are guys that I'm like really excited to see what their third, maybe their second, third, and maybe even fourth project is going to be. Because I think that like all of those games were very, very promising, but you got to see more, right? Like it wasn't there, but it was in the direction of being there, right? Lies of P. I actually think Lies of P is a great example of that. Lies of P was... There were a lot of things I didn't like about Lies of P, but Lies of P was a game that innovated on the Souls-like genre in a way that was actually good. And I think that like their new expansion, their DLC, and I think their new game, I'm super excited to play it. Because like I feel like the only thing that I didn't like about Lies of P is I felt like there was too much like gimmicks with bosses. And I didn't like that. I thought it made the game not fun for me. But visually was cool. Yeah, it was a really great idea. Camera was an issue sometimes, but that was it. Input reading. Yeah, and it was also like, for example, there were like animation things. What gimmicks? For example, like there was a boss that would go off screen and then hit you. And then there was another boss that had an overhead, like the swamp boss, I remember, had like 4 or 5 different overhead smashes that all had different parry timings. And I felt like that type of challenge wasn't really very fun, especially considering like when you're looking at like basically delay attacks with pretty much no time to react, you just have to memorize the timing. I feel like playing against something like that doesn't really feel like... I don't feel like I'm getting better as a player. I feel like I'm just learning how to beat that boss. Whereas, like, if I beat a boss like Slave Knight Gale or like Ishin, I feel like I've become better as a player because I've learned how to use the tools that are given to me in a more effective way that's more holistic than just learning timings for bosses. And so that's why I don't really like delay attacks in games. Why does no one hold Elden Ring to these standards? Because the bosses that have delay attacks in Elden Ring are pretty easy. And also, I did, by the way, like, I said that some of the bosses in, like, the Elden Ring DLC I thought were problematic. And a lot of people didn't like some of the bosses in Elden Ring. Yeah, so that's the reason why. That's a From Software experience. You as a player improves. Yeah, and so I have a lot of opinions about that in terms of like how boss design is made. And that's why I'm really glad to see this game here, because I don't think that this game follows through with a lot of those problems. Like, I don't really see a lot of delay attacks. Like, if you look at these animations, these are fluid animations that would make sense logically for a person to move. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's not like he's holding his attack or doing anything like that. The Gaius was the worst. Yeah, I mean, like, my build one-shot him, but that's because I was just, like, you know, playing something that was broken. So, yeah.